Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Hey, Not So Average listeners, it's Alistair, and I am so excited to be back with a one-on-one video. These are kind of my opportunities to share with you guys things that I've been working on, things that resonate well with me. And for everybody that's been wondering, like, where were you during the summer 2025? Where were the episodes? I think this episode is going to cover that pretty well. The topic that we are covering today really resonates with me and hits close to home, and it's on the topic of burnout. Now, if you're like me, or if you're like 50% of the population, this is something that you've experienced, and this is a topic that I can't wait to get into. So let's get after it. Burnout is no longer the exception, it's the norm. The World Health Organization has even gone so far as to recognize it as an occupational phenomenon. At its core, burnout is when you feel completely drained in your body, in your mind, in your emotions, because the stress has gone on for a little too long. Sound familiar? This particular episode really resonates with me, and in part is the reason why there weren't any episodes during the summer of 2025. I was burning the candle at both ends, which wasn't helping or progressing me any further, and it was turning into basically a detriment. Now, for some people that might not have recognized what burnout feels like, burnout usually shows up in three ways. So, exhaustion, and I'm talking always tired, no energy. You might have had 8 hours of sleep, but when your alarm clock goes off, you're looking at that clock and you're like, no, I need another 6 hours for sure. Everything in you is completely spent. Then you have negativity. For others, you might feel distant, you could be irritable, or you might just come across as not caring anymore. This is closely correlated to that exhaustion, and just frankly, you just don't have enough spoons to give. And then you got low performance. So struggling to focus or get things done. We've all had those moments where you're just staring at a blank wall and you can't seem to muster up the strength, or maybe it's the courage or any level of energy to move the muscles to get you out of that position. It happens when demand keeps piling up, but you don't get enough rest, support, or balance. And right now, studies show over half of North America workers report being burnt out. In some surveys, putting it as high as 2/3 in 2025. That's significant. That's huge. The groups hit hardest within these studies were indicated as healthcare workers and education. Almost half of the health workers say they burned out, with teachers not far behind. But it's not just about professionals, it's also about generations. You have Gen Z and millennials reporting burnout rates at 61 to 68% compared to just 30% found in baby boomers. Now, this was a stat that I found really interesting, so I had to dive in a little bit more about it. Why the gap? So younger workers are in the grind years. That's what we've often heard. Juggling debt, housing costs, side hustles, and careers that never shut off because of technology. So the younger generation, they live in an always-on work mode with things like Slack, email, constant messaging, and text messages wherever you are, versus the boomers, on the other hand, often have clear work-line boundaries and more job security. So staying with one employer for 8 years or more compared to the younger generations that have an average of 2 to 3 years for the workforce. They also tend to describe being overworked as, say, stressed or tired, while younger generations have labeled it burnout. So that could be part of the reason why it's a difference of 50%. And there's a bigger truth. Burnout isn't just about long hours at work. It's also about the world we live in. Financial pressures, the push to always achieve, and social media's hustle culture is continuously amplifying this stress. That constant comparison and pressure to perform can be just as draining as a job itself. And I think we've all felt that. You get onto social media because you're just completely wiped from work. Then you see that somebody else is out there working harder. The words of David Goggins, who's going to carry the boats? And that is meant to motivate you, but it actually demoralizes you and makes you feel worse. So then sometimes you put time into things that aren't necessary because you believe that that is a necessity to fit in with current culture. But all this being left unchecked, burnout doesn't just make you tired. It wears you down, not just your body, but your mind, and even your relationships. It can spiral into depression, chronic health issues, and career setbacks. That's why catching it early and taking it seriously isn't just important, it's essential. So this is kind of the part where I wanted to get real. Burnout has been something that I have personally experienced, at least from my end, and recognized twice in my life. In the past, I've spoken about some of the organizations and work experiences that I've had. One of them was a big-time tech company here in Calgary, Alberta, that has since then made the news due to, unfortunately, having to close its doors. The organization was named Autobotics. Now, before we get into this topic, this isn't a discussion of blame or putting anything on anybody else's shoulders. This was just my personal experience, and a lot of it stemmed from what I wanted to showcase to others and burdens that I put on my own shoulders. But this organization was where I experienced it. And the crazy thing about it all was burnout wasn't actually recognized until well after I had been sunsetted from that organization and moved into another role. Now, Autobotics was an amazing environment, constantly pushing the envelope. And because I believe so strongly in the mission, I put in more hours than I guess I could say I've ever done in the past. It was really easy for me to start my day off at 5 a.m. I was a perpetual early riser for the reason that I believed that I needed to put in 1 or 2 hours each morning to read up on topics that might put me in a better position to help the organization. So what my role was at that point in time was, I guess, a pseudo chief of staff. So I've worked very closely with the CEO. I traveled around the globe with him. I was in every single meeting. So I was referred to as his golf caddy. And I was quite flattered by that. But what that meant was that I was good enough to play the game, but my sole role was to help educate and improve the game of my CEO. So I took that upon myself to constantly level up, get more information. And this was the best part of that, was I was constantly learning. Now the issue with this was I would start at 5 a.m. Then I'd go into work. I'd put in a good solid 8 to 10 hour day. And then I'd go home, try and keep a social life, then wrap up the day with more studying in literature. But this is all intertangled with a constant work travel schedule. So being a part of this particular company's work structure, I was traveling nearly every single week. So in 2019, we had taken on about 160 flights over the course of the year. So this was the year before COVID. So open borders. And there was days that we would literally get 1 hour's notice and I'd hop on a plane. Now, in my late 20s, this was a super exciting period of time. There was a lot to be in awe of. And the fact that I had 2 hours notice and I knew I was going to be in Philadelphia, or I was going to be flying to Singapore, or I would be going down to San Francisco, a city that I've always loved, felt like something to be excited about. But the combination of early rising, which then turned into early rising in different time zones, which turned into constant periods of time on a plane, which is wearing on your body, which then turned into 5 to 7 day work weeks because you'd be putting in the grind on the weekends. Eventually, my body and my mind started to have enough. Like I said, after Autobotics and I left and went separate ways, that was when I was able to basically remove myself from my day-to-day structure and start to recognize, I guess, some bad habits that were coming out of it. The burnout was leading to a miserable Alistair because I had no pause. I had no rest. I never realized the importance of downtime, and essentially this hustle culture that I bolstered myself was starting to eat away at me. What ended up happening was I could see in my relationships, I could see in my friendships, I could see just in my general mentality that I was spent. I was completely drained. And you might have heard about the analogy of pouring from an empty cup. That was me. I couldn't give any more to anybody else. I had no more spoons to give. And every day I felt spent. And it was because I never gave myself the time to relax and calm down. Now, you would think that I learned my lesson, but I didn't. I have a personal attachment to the hustle culture. I love it. I probably would be diagnosed as somebody that is addicted to the stress. Now you fast forward a couple years later, so we're talking 6 years later, I am now at an organization that has gone coast to coast within 3 years, a solar company that I'm really proud to be a part of, but I'm embodying the same mentality that I had at Autobotics where, well, why don't I just wake up a little bit earlier so that I can hustle for longer? Let's take less vacation days because I need to get these particular projects done. Why don't I spend a few more hours at the office? Because then by depleting my to-do list, that should then relieve the stress that I'm feeling. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. There are endless studies out there that have proven that you need downtime. You need approximately, I think what I read last was about 2 weeks to fully decompress from your usual day-to-day. The issue is, most times, myself included, when you take a vacation, you just fill it with to-do tasks. Now, I think we all understand that there is often a list of things that we still need to get done. We still need to operate as adults. But there is something to be said about, hey, I'm going to take this week off. I'm not going to, do things remotely related to my job. I am going to just actually purposefully be bored. So there was, at one point in time, by Tim Ferriss, it's called The Busyness Manifesto. I strongly recommend everybody checks that out. There is this constant calling for us to be busy. Now, how many times, now this is a complete tangent, I realize where I'm going with this. How many times do you reach out to somebody and say, hey, how you been? And their instant response is busy. There's a point of pride in our society right now to acknowledge that we're busy, as if that is a badge of honor. You get this all the time. You'll reach out to some friends, you'll reach out to a family member. What have you been up to? Oh, I've just been super busy. Whether or not they have been, it's irrelevant. It's such a random point of pride in society right now. What I'd love to see is, I've been fantastic, and let me explain all the awesome things that I've been up to, versus I've been busy. What am I to do with that? And frankly, it's so sad to hear that that's the most frequent response we're getting from our friends and our family. Now, going back to why this podcast is so personal to me and why there hasn't been episodes in 2 months, was because I had reached a point where I had no more energy to give. Now, I have a responsibility at work, and my day-to-day impacts other people in the organization, and I've put this weight on my shoulders. Nobody else has, but I've come to recognize that if I do not deliver on my tasks, my to-dos, and I don't execute properly, that I impact several hundred other people within our organization. I wear that. That's something that I need to work on, because that's a burden that can be actually carried with more supportive team members by just commenting like, hey, I need a hand. But probably closer to June, I was really kind of at my capacity, and I voiced this to my team, and I was very lucky that they did step up and they offered me support. But what people don't talk about is how long it takes you to get back to level or a point of normal after burnout. It's almost like with burnout, you are depleted negative energy, negative 50% Alistair. And so even though I was afforded the ability to rejuvenate in June, up until this point in what is now September, this recording is happening, I'm only just starting to go past my zero and make my way back up to 100% energy, Alistair. And this isn't anybody else's fault, but there is a level of ownership that I have, that I need to stop putting so much weight on career and start putting more focus on important areas of my life, like friends, family, relaxation, travel, all the things that you think that when you work hard, you want to play even harder. But because I'm working so hard, I don't have any of that stuff to give attention to. So if I'm honest about why I keep reaching this point of burnout, it's because I push too hard. I take on too much, and I don't always give myself the same rest and balance I encourage others to take. I have frequently told people like, hey, self-care, what are you doing? As recently as last week, I was talking to somebody that is completely stressed out about their business. And I said, have you taken any time to just escape to the mountains, nature bathe? Are you journaling? Are you taking time to meditate? All these kind of things that I know I do, but I need to do so much more of, like the vacation time. And that's the hard part about burnout, is it's easier to give feedback to others versus reflecting inwardly. It creeps up, and by the time you recognize that you've hit this point of burnout, you're already in it. You've already surpassed it. You're buried. You're Batman in the cave. You are just unreachable. However, I've been really lucky to twice dig myself out of it. So the big question is, if burnout is this common, what can we actually do about it? Here are some ways to keep it at bay and protect your energy before it gets to that breaking point. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. There's a lot of room for improvement. That's the best part about life, is there's always ways that you can step up and improve. So here are some of my recommendations. There's 6 of them. Number 1, set boundaries. Protect time outside of work. I understand that you can be passionate about your job, but don't always be on. I had a phone call with somebody as I was escaping to relax a couple weekends ago. And she said something to me that I actually applied, and it was amazing. So with this on culture, it's really easy to keep simple notifications on your phone, like your work email. And she told me she doesn't have her work email on her phone. That was the quickest way that she created a boundary. So she works with an organization that is based in Calgary, Alberta, but has operations in India. So that time zone is crazy. She could be working first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and it just wears on her. Well, she made a decision that when she closes her laptop at the end of the day, there is no more emails until she enters the office at, I think it's around 8 a.m. the next day. And I applied that. Game changer. As soon as I heard that, there was a eureka moment. This is just one of my recommendations. So within setting boundaries, there's also limit after hour emails, so Slack or work calls when possible. So that's protect your time, then limit after hours. And then create physical and mental separation between work and personal life. With this whole work from home society, this is becoming more and more difficult. Now, there's obviously perks. I've been fortunate enough to be on both sides of having an office environment and then having a work from home environment. You know, there's nothing like realizing that you have a meeting at 8 a.m. and you're still in bed at 7:50 and knowing that you can still make that call versus that's a very different reality when it's 8 a.m. meeting time and you're 7:50 in pajamas and you got to get all the way to work. But this separation in space really creates an environment for you to kind of free your mind. There was something that always stuck with me when I was younger. My parents said when it came to studying, so I was in elementary school all the way through high school. When it came to studying, you don't study on your bed because your bed is a place for you to sleep. You're training your mind that when you go to bed and you sit on that piece of furniture or lie down on that piece of furniture, your mind can shut off and go to sleep. By studying on that piece of furniture, you're countering that whole purpose of the bed, which is to relax and go to sleep. That's one thing that's always stuck with me. So create physical or mental separation between work and personal life. Number 2, prioritize rest and recovery. Aim for consistent sleep. We've all heard this. Truthfully, over this last year, so since I started this podcast, one of the things that I try and protect at all costs is my sleep. Burnout often starts with fatigue. So if you can get yourself 7 to 8 hours when you might be currently giving yourself 5 to 6, there is going to be a huge output difference there. I can't say enough about protecting your sleep. Make sure that you have a consistent wake-up time. So there was a study, and I'm going to have to find this for another episode to comment on. There's a sleep specialist based out of Canada that talked about what is more important, getting 8 hours of sleep, but differing go-to-bed times and wake-up times, or waking up at the same time. And he said, if you have to impact your sleep in any way, because say life happens, wake up at the same time every time. Sure, 8 hours is fantastic, but if you're on a completely different rhythm, you do yourself more damage by going to bed at 4 a.m. and waking up at noon than if you just went, now within reason, you go to bed at say 1 a.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. because that's when you always wake up. So take that with a grain of salt. I should probably get the information to back it, but try and have a consistent wake up time. Try that out for a couple weeks. You'll see that there's a huge difference. And this is something that I've basically rolled out myself, because over this last year, going to bed isn't something that I can always control, even though I have an alarm on my phone that says 9:30, get your ass to bed. I have found that if I have to wake up, it's better to do the same time versus trying to get another 3 hours or 2 hours of sleep to hit my 8-hour window. Build in breaks during the day. So something that I've done personally is found moments during the day where I escape the fluorescent lights and go and stretch out on the grass that I have in front of my office, or just go for a quick loop around the office. People have this weird fascination that they need to just sit there and grind out their working day. By compartmentalizing and separating and getting a break for 5 minutes outside, you are actually going to add efficiencies and effectiveness to your day versus just sitting there staring at a screen like a fucking zombie, just trying to kill the clock. Go take that 5-minute walk. Go take that 15-minute walk. Whatever it takes, you'll realize when you come back, if you just put your phone down, away, out of sight, out of mind, you're going to be so much more productive than if you just stared at that screen. Use vacations or downtime fully. I'm going to say that again. Use vacations or downtime fully. It's not just to catch up on tasks. I've already alluded to this. We often take vacation time to catch up on things. How often do we, get that yard project done or something like that, and then we go back to work and we're just absolutely spent? Now, I get sometimes you got to do that. You got to help out where you can. But, taking time off to just do more work, to clear that to-do list, that reality check is going to keep growing, serves nobody. Okay? And we got number 3. Focus on health basics. So move your body regularly. Knock on wood, likely one of the reasons why I am a high-functioning burnout-holic is because I exercise very regularly. Okay? Within my office, I have a walking treadmill and a standing desk. I will walk on that thing for 2 hours every single day. I will hit the gym. I will go dancing. I will train martial arts. I will go do an activity with friends. I recently got into running. I move my body. Being stationary is the new smoking. So this is one way that I strongly recommend you can make a difference in your life. I'm not saying go pick up a freaking CrossFit class. I'm not saying go jump into an Ironman. What I'm saying is move your body, go for a walk, start small. I'm not going to get onto the topics of good habits and all that stuff because that's not my place. I know it's difficult for everybody. But if you can just find time to go take your kids for a walk, to go grab a friend and jump on the phone and have a conversation while you walk around the community, or you get a new audio book, and I'm sticking with walking. Walking changes your state of mind. It's hard to be stuck when your body's in motion. Eat balanced meals and stay hydrated. I don't think we need to get into that too much. Everybody knows what that looks like. Practice mindfulness, meditation, or breathing exercises to calm the nervous system. That's probably been the biggest difference between burnout Alistair during antibiotics and around the early 2020s to 2025 burnout Alistair is I've incorporated meditation and mindfulness. So now I recognize when my heart rate is absolutely just pounding out of my chest and I need to just regroup. So simple things like breathing exercises have been something that I've constantly applied to my job. And I'm not perfect once again, but I can recognize when a position is being taken, I'm getting stuck, I'm digging in my heels, my heart rate's going because I am so burnt out. I don't have that emotional capacity to slow myself down and prevent myself from snapping. I can now recognize that. I use that mindfulness. Take 5 big breaths. The remarkable thing is these 5 big breaths might feel like a really long period of time to you, but nobody really notices that minute slowdown in your communication cadence. And for some reason, you can just address the situation appropriately after that. That is probably my biggest difference. So I've incorporated mindfulness. I've also added meditation and just major breathing exercises. It's remarkable how we forget to breathe when we're so pent up. Now, number 4, reframe workload and expectations. Delegate or ask for support when possible. Don't carry everything alone. We've all been there. We think that it's easier to sometimes just like, well, fine, I'll just do it myself. Well, the reality is you're basically training the rest of the people on your team, if you're a manager or stuff like that, to just hand that over to you because it's easier for them to just have you do it. And the reality is, if you could all carry this load together, that they could acknowledge or tackle this task because you've taken the time to train them once, you're not going to have this back on your plate likely ever again. Break big projects into smaller, achievable steps. So that's something that is really easy to do versus looking at, holy fuck, I have this daunting project that needs to be done. I need to split it up. Now, I'm really fortunate. I work with some really smart people on my team. And one of them is a product manager. He is phenomenal at this. I give him the big, hairy, audacious goal, and he puts them into bite-sized pieces. Sometimes they feel more like a foot long, but anywho, they are put into a more appetizing task list. It's way easier to approach your elephant by taking it one piece at a time versus just looking at it and just realizing that this is going to take you forever. Having the little minute wins because you split them up makes tackling any big project a lot simpler. Be realistic. Not everything has to be done perfectly or immediately. That one hits home because I am so quick to feeling that it needs to be done now. Everything is an immediate emergency. There was this funny meme that was on Instagram. Obviously, my feed is feeding me exactly what I feel or what it feels I need in the moment. And it was, your poor planning does not constitute an emergency on my side. And that's something that I've obviously can't always voice, but I need to recognize, hey, this is less about me. This has to do with somebody else. Now, as respectfully as possible, indicating, hey, I will get to this, but I need to prioritize some other things right now. In my line of work, I have to say kind of when I hope to get to it, but recognizing that somebody else might be frantically scrambling, but that does not mean that I have to, in turn, be frantically scrambling. Number 5, stay connected. Share honestly with peers, mentors, or leaders. Don't isolate. It's really easy to just kind of shell up. I personally felt that as, a single guy, it is really simple to go home, jump on the couch, veg out, and maybe not share what's going on. But the biggest thing that's helped me in my entire life is the fact that I lack a filter and I love to share where I'm at with others. And I personally found that by doing so, it gives space for others who may not have felt the ability to be open about this stuff before to share that they are also maybe in a similar situation. So there's something therapeutic about trauma bonding with other people. By sharing with others, not only do you lift that burden off from your shoulders, you might even find that they or the person that is receiving what you're sharing is able to do the same. Build social connections outside of work that recharge you. This podcast is one of those things for me. My jiu-jitsu community, my dance community, My startup community are all places that give me, an extra couple, 5, 10, 15% every couple of weeks that then I can then use to keep pushing at work. What is your social connection where you charge? Maybe write that out. Remember that relationships are one of the strongest buffers against burnout. I don't know why this is put as point number 5, but I probably should have put that up closer to the top. But I needed you guys to keep listening. Reconnect to meaning and purpose. Now, this one I deliberately put at the bottom because right now there is a purpose epidemic. Everybody is trying to find purpose. You know what? I think that's a privilege of the 21st century, is having purpose that pays. Now I understand we all need a purpose, but maybe that's not always your line of work. Maybe it's something that doesn't pay but fills your cup outside. So reflect on what parts of your work actually feel energizing. So if you can, and you have the opportunity to say, hey, this is not my forte, and maybe you can find somebody else that wants to carry that, hand it off to them. Align tasks with your values where you can, right? When work feels purely draining, counterbalance with meaningful activities outside of it. So this is what I often do, is when my mind is absolutely spent, I go and counterbalance it by physical activity. I love that stuff. I love finding fulfillment in learning a new sport or in learning a new dance, all those sort of things. So that's how I've actively gone and countered my burnout. Now, burnout prevention isn't about doing less. It's about protecting your energy, set boundaries, rest well, stay connected, and focus on what actually matters. If you don't protect your energy, nobody else will. Burnout is something that I've personally lived with, and I've kind of shared 2 scenarios of that. And I know many of you listening have experienced this too. Statistically speaking, depending on who you look at, it's 50% or 2/3 of the population have experienced burnout here in North America. It's not just a workplace issue anymore. It's a life issue. The world we live in pushes us to always do more, be more, and prove more. But the truth is, success isn't about how much you can carry before you break. It's about learning how to protect your energy so you can keep showing up in a way that lasts. Life is a marathon. We've all heard this probably endlessly in our life. If you take anything away from this, let it be this. Burnout prevention isn't about slowing down your ambition. It's about giving yourself the margin to sustain it. Some of my past guests have said the same in their own ways. Haley Daniels talks about protecting mental health as much as physical training. Chef Mike Pigeot shared how burnout forced him to reinvent himself. And Mandy Ballack reminded us that rest periods are as important to work on as the work itself. Protect your time, protect your health, and protect your spark, because the world doesn't need a burnt out version of you. It needs the real you at your best. For everybody that made it all the way to the end of this, I'm incredibly grateful. I personally find this almost nearly therapeutic to share some of my experiences. And now I'm not a guru. This is just some guy that really likes to share his story. And one of the topics that has been near and dear to my heart for several years now has been burnout. I've had endless discussions with friends about it. And it isn't something that's just found in, high achieving type A individuals. Everybody is feeling this. So if this resonates with you at all, please share with some friends. Leave a comment. Reach out to us on social media. You know how to get a hold of us. But let's get after it.